In the ancient world, in a region known as the land of Uz, there lived a man whose name would become synonymous with endurance. His name was Job. To look at Job's life was to see a man who had attained everything a human being could desire. He possessed wealth that rivaled kings, a family that brought him constant joy, and a reputation that commanded respect in every corner of the land. Yet Job's identity was rooted in something far deeper than his possessions. He was a man of profound integrity. The scriptures describe him as blameless and upright, someone who feared God and turned away from every form of evil. This was his daily practice, a rhythm of life that defined his every waking hour. Job did not simply follow rules, he lived with a heart that was constantly attuned to the divine. Job's blessings were vast. His household was a centerpiece of the community. He was the father of 7 sons and 3 daughters, a full house that echoed with laughter and the sounds of celebration. His material wealth was equally staggering. He owned 7,000 sheep that covered the hillsides like a white blanket. He possessed 3,000 camels, 500 yoke of oxen for his fields, and 500 donkeys. To manage such an estate, he employed a small army of servants. By the standards of the East, Job was the greatest man of his time. Despite this immense power, Job remained a father of deep concern and spiritual diligence. He knew that even in moments of joy, the human heart could wander. His children often gathered for feasts, moving from one brother's house to another in a cycle of family unity. When these periods of feasting ended, Job would rise while the sun was still below the horizon. He would prepare burnt offerings for each of his children, thinking to himself that perhaps they had sinned or turned their hearts away from God in the midst of their festivities. This was his regular habit, an act of intercession that showed the depth of his love and his commitment to righteousness. However, beyond the rolling hills of Uz, in a realm Job could not perceive, a different kind of conversation was taking place. The heavenly court had assembled, and among the celestial beings came the adversary, Satan, who had been roaming the earth. God initiated the conversation, pointing toward his faithful servant. He asked the adversary if he had noticed Job, noting that there was no one else on earth like him, a man of perfect integrity who remained faithful in all things. The adversary responded with a sneer. He argued that Job's faithfulness was merely a product of his protection. He claimed that Job served God for the benefits provided, the hedge of protection around his home, the success of his work, and the multiplication of his wealth. The challenge was issued. "Stretch out your hand and strike everything he has, and he will curse you to your face." With absolute confidence in Job's character, God allowed the test to proceed. He granted the adversary power over everything Job owned, with one singular restriction: Job himself must not be touched. The shift from total blessing to total loss happened with terrifying speed. It began on a day that seemed like any other. The sun was shining over the fields of Uz. Job's children were gathered at the home of the eldest brother, enjoying a meal together. Job was likely at home, perhaps resting or attending to the business of his estate. The first messenger arrived suddenly, his breath coming in short, ragged bursts. He brought news of the oxen and donkeys. As the animals were plowing and grazing in their accustomed places, Sabean raiders had swept down in a violent surge. They stole every animal and put the servants to the sword. "I am the only one who escaped to tell you," the messenger gasped. Before the first man had even finished his report, a second messenger appeared on the horizon. His face was pale, his eyes wide with a shock that seemed to transcend physical pain. He spoke of a fire from the sky, a fire of God that had fallen upon the pastures. In an instant, 7,000 sheep and the shepherds tending them were consumed, The wealth of the hillsides had turned to ash in a heartbeat. Again, the refrain was the same. I alone have escaped to tell you. Job had no time to process the theft of his livestock or the death of his workers before a third messenger stumbled into view, covered in the dust of the road. This man spoke of the Chaldeans. They had organized into 3 raiding parties, surrounding the 3,000 camels and driving them away. They showed no mercy to the servants, leaving only one survivor to carry the news back to the master of the house. In the span of a few minutes, Job had been stripped of his livelihood. His status, his security, and his wealth were gone. But the final blow was yet to come, and it was the one that would shatter his world completely. As the third messenger was still speaking, the fourth and final messenger arrived. Unlike the others, who spoke with a frantic energy, this man seemed almost broken by the weight of his words. He told Job of the gathering at the eldest brother's house. He described a mighty wind, a desert gale, that came screaming out of the wilderness. It struck the 4 corners of the house with such force that the structure collapsed instantly. The messenger's voice broke as he delivered the final truth. All 10 of Job's children were dead. The silence that followed must have been heavy. Imagine the physical sensation of losing everything in a single hour. Your children, your life's work, your legacy, all vanished. The people around you might say you deserve it. They might suggest that such a concentrated series of disasters could only be a punishment from heaven. Later, even those closest to Job would tell him to abandon his faith, to curse the Creator, and find the release of death. Job's reaction, however, defied human expectation. He stood up and tore his robe, a sign of intense mourning. He shaved his head, stripping himself of his outward dignity. Then he did something that seems impossible to the natural mind. He fell to the ground and worshipped. He did not lash out in anger. He did not demand an immediate explanation for the suffering that made no sense. Instead, he spoke words that have echoed through the centuries. Naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I will depart. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. May the name of the Lord be praised. This was the beginning of Job's long journey through the ashes. It was a journey through physical pain, through the misguided accusations of friends, and through a silence from heaven that seemed to last forever. Job's story is not about a man who had all the answers. It is a story about a man who had 1,000 questions, but refused to let go of the one who held his soul. It challenges us to look at our own lives. We often believe that if we do good, we will receive good. We think of faith as a contract, a way to ensure safety and prosperity. But Job's life proves that true faith is not a transaction. It is a relationship that exists even when the blessings are gone, even when the sores are painful, and even when the world says we are being punished. As we look at Job sitting in the ruins of his life, we see the image of a faith that refuses to die. We see a man who understood that God's ways are higher than human imagination. He didn't know about the conversation in the heavenly realm. He didn't know there was a purpose behind his pain. He only knew that the God he had served in the light was the same God he must trust in the darkness. This story forces us to ask, would our faith survive such a test? Could we still trust when everything we believed seems like a lie? Job's life offers an answer. It tells us that while suffering is inevitable and often inexplicable, the human spirit, anchored in the divine, can endure the impossible. It reminds us that even when we lose everything, we have not lost the one who created us. In the end, Job's story is a testament to the fact that hope can grow even in the middle of the ashes.